Joining me for today's presentation are my colleagues, Mary Ellen Smith, who is a senior editor here at General Code, and Christina Laverty, who is Vice President of Client Engagement. So we're going to be sharing the presentation responsibilities, and you'll see us pop in and out. And without further ado, I'm going to bring us to our first slide here and have Christina kick us off.
Thank you, Jeannie. So welcome, everyone. I thought I would just, prior to getting into the presentation today, talk a little bit about General Code and our relationship to ICC. General Code is one of 7 wholly owned subsidiaries of ICC, and we became a member of the ICC family of solutions back in 2017. Together, we are committed to building and supporting a portfolio of municipal-focused code solutions. General Code has been in business for over 59 years, building municipal codes and updating municipal codes for over 3,200 jurisdictions nationwide, and having over 2,700 of those communities provide their codes online. And together with ICC, we're excited to work on a joint initiative and project, which we'll be sharing with you today, called Custom Local Building Codes. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thanks so much for that.
Let me take it from there a little bit.
Great, Ellen, thank you.
Yep. It is the relationship between General Code and ICC that allowed us to put together this custom local building code solution that you're going to see today. And it's a solution that really is designed to help communities and all of the related constituencies be able to access local building code information from a single source with all the different provisions that you have to comply with integrated together. So the crux of what we're going to be talking about today is that instead of having to wade through multiple documents to get all the information you need and then somehow correlate all of that information together in your head, we can now provide you with a single document or set of documents that has everything in one place and all integrated together. So we take the base ICode or state amended ICode for states where the states do their own amendments, and then integrate all of the local amendments directly into the text and provide you with a single integrated reference source that has all of the regulations in one place. So Jeannie's going to show you a little bit more about what that can look like and how it works as we go through the webinar today.
Awesome, thank you. So I think I'll start out by just giving you an overall idea of what we had planned. We're going to start out sort of defining the need. What is the need for the custom codes? How could they maybe be helpful? And then give you a good overview of what the solution is. Then actually take a real deep dive into the components of the solution. So it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see them live and in action. So we'll get a chance to do that. And we'll round out our time together with talking about sort of pricing overview to give you a sense of what that entails, and also some ideas for funding options. Now, before I go any further, just a couple of other things I thought of. We've got a few poll questions in, and we're going to hit those in just 1 minute, a few of them. And the way that we want you to interact with us, we really are interested in hearing your thoughts and your questions. So please make sure to put them in the questions pod. And both Mary Ellen and Christina are going to be watching for those. So my job here is to take us through the demonstration, and their job is to watch your questions coming in. And when they come in, they'll turn their camera on and talk about them, and that will be our back and forth. So people are really watching that questions pod. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our first poll. I'm going to launch a poll right now. And share it. Okay, there you go. Which of the following best describes how you use the ICodes? If you could take a minute and put that information in, click one of those results. Actually, it looks like it canceled it on me. Hold on a minute. Let me see. If I can get it to come up again. and it closed it. So let's try a new one. This is an interesting question. How often do you adopt the new ICode? So I've launched that. It's distributing the poll. So many people will adopt new codes every 3 years. Some people will take a cycle off. Some people might even be longer than 6 years. Here's my thought though, if this doesn't resonate for you, this time cycle, take a moment to put it right in the questions pod, what your adoption actually looks like. Interesting, I can see the results coming through. And just to give you an early look, about 50% have voted so far. Most people, and I will get to share these results with you, most people are adopting every 3 years, although it's interesting, the more that you put in there, it's evening out. So I'll give it just a few more seconds to collect all the responses. And that is perfect. I'm going to close the poll and then share the results so you can see what I was looking at. So that has an integral effect on your custom code. So if you're adopting new codes every 3 years, there's a lot of work involved to combine the model codes with your amendments. So that makes a really nice difference. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to hide that poll and get into the need for custom codes. So one of the things that the last year taught us, beyond any doubt, that any of the resources that we needed to have access to that were not virtual were a real problem, right? We were not in our offices for most of the time. If there was a resource that we needed and it was not at our home or available digitally, it was a problem. So we have a slide here talking about how important it is to have those resources available, and look at 22% of the people said it was digital codes that I needed. Mary Ellen talked a little bit about this in the beginning. So we put together a slide here to draw a picture for you. We took a typical model code, the International Building Code, which in 2018 was about 726 pages. So we're talking about an ample book. And then our local amendments can be every bit as big. So we have a sample here from a community where they have 575 pages worth of amendments, and they need to be brought together, or what we have is 2 or even more sources that have to be referenced before we can get an answer to a question and give that to someone. A case study that we have done and will be available to you after the webinar was a case where a community tried to integrate them on their own. They used Microsoft Word, which is an awesome tool, but when it comes to formatting of tables and graphics, and even just paragraph to paragraph, the formatting continues and discontinues, and it gets very complex. So your Word documents were long and complex. Add to that the fact that inserting the local amendments was very time consuming. And so the pain is building a little bit as you're trying to do this. And then add on top of that the fact where you have frequent adoption cycles, and that is added work and, more importantly, more confusing. Where did we leave off? What documents are different people, even within your community, looking at? It gets very difficult to manage. One of the things that struck me about this case study was what the person said at the end. How important. It's so consuming to build these custom codes that I was spending all my time doing that and not focusing on the big deal of getting amendments adopted. So with their custom local building code, that sort of worry or pain went away, and they could focus on what was important, getting the right amendments adopted. Every once in a while, I'll be quiet like that to see if there's any questions and see what's coming in. Here comes Mary Ellen. You were just waiting for me to be quiet, yeah?
I was, yeah. I just wanted to add to that, that is a case study of one community that wanted to try and do this themselves. So they really recognized the problem, which was we have too many large documents and nobody can see everything that's in effect. And I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think there are many other municipalities who have even attempted such a thing. And they just look at it and say, well, we've got all these big documents. That's what we've got. That's all we have.
Yep, that's an awesome point. So the final thing I wanted to talk about with respect to the custom local building codes is everyone that benefits. So clearly, especially with the slide that we just showed, anyone who was trying to manage all that, all the building and fire officials are going to benefit from having a single source and having it, a couple of things here, having it in one location and having it in the form that you wanted, whether that was you wanted to access it online at ICC's website, if you wanted to access it through a printed book or a PDF. You'll see as we look at the solution, all of these components could be available. Who else benefits? The people trying to do business in your municipality. This information is now publicly available to them in one source. It's reliable because they don't have to check multiple sources and then hope that they've come up with the right answer. Municipal staff, you have to believe, would benefit just in the fact that they don't get as many calls because people can get the answers to their questions. The information is online. And then finally, transparency for the public. That's always been a priority. And with this custom ICode solution, that's exactly what you get, transparency for the public. All right, let's look at another poll. So let me see. How do you currently access your codes? And I made it here so that you could choose more than one if you wanted to. A printed book, PDF, or a license through Digital Codes Premium. Answers are coming in. Very interesting. I wonder how many of you are going to be surprised at what's coming in. I sort of don't want to let it out. I'll just wait a few more minutes or seconds to see if more people are going to vote. It's very heavy on one. Awesome. I'm going to close it and share it with you. So a lot of people using the printed book, which means that either you have the printed book and you have inserts in it so that you can see where the amendments are, or you're juggling both sets of books. Hopefully, I'm going to hope for you that during the past year, you had those books at home with you and so that you could access them. The nice thing about having the PDF or having the license, it is digital, and so it's a little bit easier access. I want to do one more, so I'm going to hide the results of this. And I'm curious to know, we are curious to know, how many of the ICodes do you amend, if you amend any? Once again, I'm going to remind you, if the answer that you want doesn't appear on this slide, don't forget to put it in questions because the three of us can all see that and we can share.
While people are doing that, Jeannie, I just wanted to add on the last poll, the whole thing about paper books. It is something that I have talked with several customers about very recently, which was the big problem that they had when the pandemic hit was they were trying to work from home. They had one set of books or two sets of books, and the books were in the office. So all of the people at home or in the field when they got to the point that they could go out in the field did not have access to the information that they needed. And that was their big driver for doing something about it.
Very interesting. I think once
Jeannie,
again, you're going to be surprised at what you see here. Let's see. We're still having people vote, so I'm going to hold on just a second.
Jeannie, one more thing to add in reference to the printed books. What we also found out was printed books worked really well when you were using PDFs or other printed documents with your amendments as two separate references, not realizing that a solution like custom local building codes could give you a single source online through Digital Codes Premium. My assumption is that there are a lot of users who use printed books because the opportunity to have it online wasn't available as well.
Awesome. All right. I am going to close that poll and show you the response. And once again, this surprised me. So very few of the people joining us are amending just one. And my PowerPoint stopped, so I'm getting back to that.
You do that, Jeannie. We do have a comment here that says it would be interesting to ask why people still use the book so often. Unfortunately, this user has found ICode Premium Access very difficult to use. And I think one of the things, I think that's a very good point, Darren, and I think one of the things is that it's relatively new, and we're working on building out some of the features to make it a little bit easier. And as we get further into it, we'll be having some more training and things to make that easier for people. But I agree with you, there are some pieces of it that are challenging, and we're working to make them better.
Yeah, that's a great comment to share too, because I personally recently I access the codes digitally quite often. I had a very pleasant surprise just recently, and when I do my demonstration later on, you'll get to see it. But I found that one of the features I use digitally often is search. I'm looking through the codes for a specific thing, and like Mary Ellen just said, they're working through some things, and search is much improved to my liking. So we'll see. So thank you for participating, and that helps us a lot to know kind of where you are and what you would be using the codes for. So what I'd like to do now is give you sort of an overview of the solution, remembering that we're going to take a deep dive into each one of them. So the solution is quite a lengthy thing. One thing probably won't be a surprise to you, it's the actual bringing them together and creating a single source. So that is a large piece to do. Once that happens, then all the magic gets to happen, where on ICC's website, you'll have your own landing page for your municipality. You'll get a chance to see that. Another thing is that the public gets access to this combined resource. You could, if you wanted, purchase PDFs of the code so that if you and your team are accessing the codes, in quite often maybe you're in a place where there's spotty internet connection, having access to that PDF all the time gives you the digital access you need 100% of the time. You can always get printed copies of the code. That was a no-brainer. You can always get printed copies. Of course, you can get digital licenses, Digital Codes Premium licenses for your team, for just yourself, and there's all kinds of flexibility around that, and we'll talk about that. And then another piece of the solution that we don't want to miss is updates to the custom code. So as you pass new amendments and you want them added, then we update the codes. So that is a 10,000-foot view of what the solution looks like. I'm about to take a deep dive, and I'm just hesitating a little bit. I can't pay attention to the questions, so I'm relying on Christina and Mary Ellen.
Jeannie, you are in great shape.
What's that?
You're in great shape with questions.
Awesome. All right, so taking that deep dive. All I've done here is take a screenshot. In a little while, you'll get to see this live, but it looks just like this. So for every municipality that has a custom ICode or a custom local building code, they get custom covers and they get a place on the website. So a couple of things I want to highlight on this picture that I have for you. Notice that over here, when I was doing this, I went to find codes and I just scrolled through the states. And because Harford County has one under Maryland, they have their own call out. And when somebody clicks on this, then you can see these are the 5 titles that they have customized.
Jeannie,
One thing that people are often very interested in knowing is how would I know when I'm looking at a custom code that it's a local amendment? So clearly, if you read every word and you read the word Harford, then you would know it's an amendment from them. That's not the model code. But we've gone beyond that. Anything that is a local amendment is going to be highlighted in fuchsia. Anything that is a change from the previous version of the model code will be in blue. Christina, we have something?
We do. We have a question. The question is, as the second and third and future editions of the code cycles are published, would our custom codes be updated to reflect that?
I'll take that question. The answer to that would be if you would like them to, yes. The differences in the second, third, future editions of a code cycle are usually code errata. And depending on the extent of the errata, some people would like to have those incorporated and some people, it doesn't matter as much to them. So if you would like it, then we can update yours to include the errata every time a new printing is done or a new edition. And if you don't, then we wouldn't.
Perfect.
One more question, Jeannie. I'd like to understand copyright regulations when jurisdiction-specific codes as well. I assume the jurisdiction does not own the code. It is copyrighted by ICC or General Code.
That is correct. It is copyrighted by ICC and it is licensed to you. So depending on the licenses that you need, we can set up concurrent licenses or individual licenses. And the same with the PDF, we license it, and book copies obviously are one user at a time because that's how a book works. But yes, the ICC owns the copyright. The information as far as the local amendments is still public information, but the combined publication is copyrighted.
Boy, Mary Ellen, I'm awfully glad you're here. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, and I don't know what I would have said. I would have said I'll have to get back to you. Is that one you get often, Mary Ellen? People need to know more?
Not that often, but it's important to know, and it's something that I deal with every publication in terms of what needs to be copyrighted and what doesn't, and the information for the books and the PDFs.
Perfect.
So I can bring us back around now to what you were talking about in terms of the colors. I do get a question quite often, can we change the colors? And the answer to that is no. The changes from the previous edition are always in blue. The changes, if there is a state code in your state, the state code changes will be in red, and then the local changes will be in fuchsia. We'd like to keep those colors consistent across the spectrum. First of all, it works best with the technology. Second of all, as people look from one custom code to another, they will know that those colors always mean the same thing.
Yeah, I can imagine if I was a contractor or a developer and I moved from, space to space, county to county, that I would appreciate that sort of consistency, that I don't have to figure out a new color coding scheme every time I start a new job.
Right. And then actually, Jeannie, if you want to flip to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the paper version. So those colors that we talked about there, those would show up in the digital version, and those would also show up in the PDF version. Okay, both of those would have the colors. When we talk about print, anybody who does any volumes of print, which we certainly do, knows that color printing can get very expensive. So we've come up with a solution for the print versions that also lets you know what the changes are, but saves the cost of having to print very costly full color versions. So the page that you see here shows margin markings. And what we do is make a different margin marking for the local amendment. In this code, what you see right there is the squiggly line and the straight line for the changes from the previous version. So that also allows us to print these large volumes, because they can be hundreds and hundreds of pages, in black and white, but still give you the information in the printed volume that shows what changes were made by whom.
And Mary Ellen, if I'm not mistaken, what we're looking at on the screen now is a little bit reminiscent of a current printed model code, in that the margin markings, wherever there is a change from the previous code, there's a straight line similar to what we see at the bottom of this page.
Correct.
So that's nice for people, because it would feel familiar. People who use the model codes all the time, it would feel familiar.
Right.
Mary Ellen, I get a question when we're actually selling the solution that I'd like you to answer as well. Because so many of our customers are used to the model codes, the format of the code itself, how it's bound, the layout of the page, can you spend a couple of minutes just talking about the difference of how a printed custom local code book looks versus a model code book?
Sure. That double column format that the ICodes are in was developed at a time when there really were only print books. And I'm sure the design of it was to try and fit more on a page and make it so that the books were of a size that people could actually carry around, because otherwise they'd be so big and so heavy you couldn't realistically do that. With the current environment today, where so much more is accessed digitally, we want to make it more readable in a digital format. So we're using a single column format, both for the online version and also for the PDF version, because that makes it easier to read. And then the print version out of that is the same. It is also a single column. And it's a little bit larger type than people are used to trying to have to deal with in the ICodes themselves in the print version.
But then circling back to the original question that was asked about amending, do we edit them throughout? If it was printed as we see here on this page in a single column, it would be easier to update the book if we had to take out a single page than the two column format. It might be harder to manage the pages.
Right, that is the other thing that I didn't say that we are doing, which is with the custom local code, instead of them being perfect bound, like those soft covers that you see and they're bound on the side, these are going to be in 3-leaf binders, which allows you to put in and take out pages, which allows us to do the thing where we can provide you with updates during the 3-year cycle as they put new errata in, and we can have those put into your code without having to reprint the whole thing.
We put a bow on this. Should we move on? Or if any other questions come in, we can just come back.
Okay.
All right. So the next section, the next deep dive we're going to do has to do with accessing the codes online through Digital Codes Premium. So what does having the codes online mean? Well, when you log in, you have the ability to search, as I talked about a little while ago, and I'll demonstrate. They're of course available anywhere you have access to the internet on any device that's web enabled. You can annotate them, and my favorite thing is the ability to share them. So if I am working side by side with Christina or Mary Ellen, and I put a note in the code, I learned something on the job site, I can choose to share that with them, which can be really valuable and saving of time. For those of you that have downloaded the presentation, or you can do it at any time, we put links all throughout the deck that you can use at any time. So I'm not going to click this link right now, but I'm going to go to it. I've got everything open for the sake of time. That's a live link for you. So let me get over there. I thought I did. Well, there it is. And so what I wanted to show you is what it looks like for the public. I thought I would start there. I know we're talking Digital Codes Premium, but I did want to show you an example. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner, I am not logged in. So this is as if I was living or working in Harford County and I got to this place. This is their landing page. Here are all of their codes. I will hover over one just for a second to show you that I could actually, as a person who lived or worked here, subscribe to the custom local code right here. All I'm going to do is view it, and I want you to see that because it is a custom code, when I click on that view button, it's going to open up this code for me. And allow me to peruse it. So if I start right here on chapter 1, scope and administration, it takes me right to that place in the code. I can scroll through it, and I'll try to do that slow so it doesn't make you seasick. You can see right away wherever the changes are from Harford County, they're in fuchsia. And I'll scroll down a little bit, and there we have it. If there is something that has changed from the previous version, it is blue. So it looks like what I did was I opened a bunch of tabs so I could show you public view versus logged in view, but because I'm logged in on another tab, it took me to the logged in view. So you'll either have to one of two things. Believe me when I tell you that the public gets access to this, or two, click on the link for yourself, especially if you don't have a login to ICC's code. Don't log in, and you're going to see that they can view them. They can read and view them, but that is where it ends. Once you log in, and so when I went to this page, you can see what it did. It sees me logged in right up here. And with my Digital Codes Premium license, what I get that the public doesn't get is a whole separate set of menus that are behind this number pad over here. So if I click on this, then I can see that I could print this portion of the code. I can share it by sending an email to someone. So if I'm answering a question for someone, I can absolutely do that. I can bookmark any part of the code that I maybe access frequently, or I can make an annotation on it. I'm going to show you what I was so excited about not too long ago. So here I am in the mechanical code for Harford, and I'm going to search it. I know that we put an amendment in there about HVACR, and I want to see where it is. I'm going to search. So I'm going to type in HVACR and press enter. And the thing that I was most excited about, in the past when I did a search, I got results across my entire library. I only want to search the book that I'm in, that I want to find the result from here. Look at this, there is only one result. And in my area over here where my tools are, I've got a new button that allows me to jump right to that section in the code. And so now it is going to redraw my screen and take me right to that place. And yep, that is exactly what I was hoping for. I knew it was a local amendment that we had added. I wanted to see it in the code. Maybe I've got to reference it for someone, so I would come over here and click on the share button to send them an email. It's just that easy. That's me being quiet, seeing if anything came in.
No questions at this point, Jeannie.
Tina and Mary Ellen, anything else you want me to show while I'm here?
Jeannie, I will say this. One of the things that people might not realize is part of a custom local building code, not only are we creating the code itself available here on Digital Codes Premium, but we're also creating a landing page that is being hosted on ICC's site where your library lives. And this is exactly what Jeannie showed you earlier before we got into this particular title. That landing page allows your constituents and the users of this code to go to all of your ICode titles that you've adopted, the ones that are custom and the ones that you are using as models, all in one place. This is a great centralized repository that you can use if you prefer the digital environment. versus having to have multiple printed books on your shelf that you're pulling down, or trying to go and open up PDFs that you might have saved in a particular folder. So for those of you that are sharing that information with developers and architects and those that are third party to your municipality, this gives them a great place to go to one source and one location and get everything they need.
I think it's also been a great ad that now, and it's something that's been in development, that now the public, even people who don't log in, can see the color coding, because it really does help clarify a lot. All right, I'm going to bounce back to our presentation, and I think we'll move into the final section of our presentation today, and we'll start with a pricing overview to give you a sense of what goes into the pricing. So, as you can see from the sheet that I'm showing you right now, it's a very difficult question to answer en masse like we are now, because there are several things that go into the pricing, and I'm going to go through them. The first one is going to be, how big is your project? So you'll recall a little while earlier, we asked, how many codes do you amend? That 1 versus 5 makes a difference, right? That just makes good sense. So that is one portion of the pricing. Another thing that you would be asked is, how many digital licenses do you think you and your team need? So ICC, maybe everyone on the call is aware, but just in case you're not, they offer concurrent licensing. So if you are a team of, say, 10 people, perhaps you want to buy a license of 5 concurrent licenses. What that means is 5 people on your team could be accessing the system and using it at any time at all. When they stop using it, then a license gets freed up and someone else can go in and use it. It's also quite flexible. If you determine that you haven't got enough concurrent licenses, there's always the room to buy more. So that would be another piece that would go into the pricing. How many concurrent licenses do you need? The next thing, do you want printed books? And if so, how many? And you can imagine the more books you need, the price would go up accordingly. The next thing is PDF licenses. How many of those might you need? And then in the same way, commentaries and standards are also available. Mary Ellen, go ahead.
We did have a question on here that dealt with pricing, so I wanted to address that now. And the question was about custom one-off printing, that it can be very expensive. And that's one of the other reasons that we're printing and providing you with loose leaf books. Is the most expensive part of printing books en masse is the binding. So when we print smaller quantities and we print them loose leaf and put them in binders for you, it keeps the price of that down considerably.
Perfect.
And then the other thing I just wanted to mention briefly was you talked about digital licenses, and one of the things I recommend to people is start smaller. You can always add. So no need to buy more than you need, right? So you might have 15 people, but maybe only 3 people need to be in at a time, or 2 people or 4 people. So buy buy a smaller amount, and then if you find that the licenses are all being used at the same time, it's very easy to just add licensing to it. So the licensing, the printed books, the PDFs are all relatively inexpensive. The expensive piece of this, of course, is all of the work of incorporating the local amendments depending on the volume. If you have 40 pages of amendments, it's very different from if you have 500 pages of amendments. But once that's done, it's done for that cycle, unless you make additional changes. So that's kind of a unit price. And then the licensing is usually we set up every 3 years.
Great. Tina, you're muted.
Jeannie, what I'd like to add in reference to pricing is to understand what part of our pricing is really a one-off pricing element and what is a maintenance pricing element. So when we build the actual custom local building codes, we charge you one time for that build. However, when you're ready to access it in print, we only charge you one time for that printed book until you need to order another. But when it comes to Digital Codes Premium, that's an annual license as stated and should be budgeted every year. But what that also includes is your hosted site on ICode, that library page where all of your digital codes can live, no matter if they're custom local building codes or they're just the regular standard model codes or commentaries or standards. So if you want to create a digital codes library for yourself that's a concurrent license or buy multiple licenses in that way, your budget number that you really want to put into your mind as you work through each year is that it covers access to the content as well as the hosting site itself. So I just wanted to just clarify that as people go into their budgeting season for the upcoming year.
I'm glad you did, Tina. That was a really good get. So while we're still talking, but before I leave pricing, so am I reading this correctly that under pricing elements where we've got those three little flags of what it is, it does also include any updates throughout the year if there's another amendment, is that correct?
Jeannie, I'll answer that for you. So let's say that you actually have an amendment that happens in between the cycle and you want that incorporated into your custom local building code. Currently, in this pricing information that we're sharing, it is not included. So that is a maintenance fee in the event that you actually want to update your code throughout your 3-year cycle or 6-year cycle. We call that supplementation. We use that term because we use it on the municipal code side when we update municipal codes on a regular basis. That is a per page rate that will be quoted at the time of doing your needs assessment.
Great. Thank you. All right, I think we're at a good stopping point to stop talking about pricing and look at some funding options. Oh, Mary Ellen, did something come in?
Sorry, it's me. No, nothing came in, but I wanted to add one more thing that we didn't really talk about. But when Tina mentioned the municipal codes and supplementing those, I do often get a question from people who have their municipal code where they might have the local amendments incorporated in there. And one of the things we can do is link from one to the other. So for example, for Hartford County, in their county code, which is all of the regulations for the county, in the building chapter, there is a link that will take the user directly to their custom local building provisions, their mechanical code, all of their different things. So that is something that we can do as well, which makes access to the information a little bit more seamless for the user.
We must have been thinking along the same lines because I was thinking when you guys were talking, rats, I wish I had opened up another tab over there. So depending on what time we end, I may demonstrate what Hartford County's municipal code looks like and how easy it is to access the ICode. All right, so funding options in the beginning of this year, March 10th, before I go too much further, ICC has incredibly good resources, and I've given you links to them. What you see on the screen in the next slide, this all came directly from the good work at ICC. Many of you on the call may have been on a webinar earlier when ICC hosted an informational webinar about the American Rescue Plan. So if not, good news for you, we've captured some of it here and given you all of the links. But a great deal of money has been allocated to municipalities for fiscal recovery funds and being able to apply for it. I'm going to show you, there's a nice overview of it, but I'm going to go to the other slide because as we have been talking about the American Rescue Plan with people, a very common question is people are confused. Are you talking about the CARES Act? No, in fact, this is something different. So what I did here on this slide is I took a snippet off the ICC page, and by the way, right over here, there's a link to it, so you can get to it if you download the slides. This goes on for some time on the ICC website, and it does a nice compare and contrast about what the CARES Act was and is, and what the American Rescue Plan is. So another really good resource for you is ICC's Coronavirus Response Center. Rather than click that link, I'm going to go back over to my browser, and I have it open. And there it is. So right on one page, so that link will bring you right to this page. Again, you can see that you're on ICC's website. They have all kinds of good information on this plan. So all of these are links so you can learn more about the American Rescue Plan. And then underneath that, if you scroll down just a little bit, it gives you an overview on the timing of the whole thing and the money that's available and so forth. I'm now going to go to the last link that I have on that page from the National League of Cities. I was very excited when I saw this in the beginning. In fact, I think it was Christina who showed it to me. It's a direct link to this page. If you scroll down a little bit, if you want to know how much money was allocated to your particular city, use this link. So we are located in Rochester, New York. So I will type in Rochester, New York, and tell it to search. The one thing I did find is you got to type it exactly right. It didn't like it when I did NY. Sometimes I have to watch my browser to make sure it's catching that I'm not ahead of it. It did such a good job. It really does work, but it is finicky about what you type. So if I scroll down here, I can pretend, because New York is pretty far down there, I could pretend I'm with one of these places and click on it. And you actually don't even have to click too much on it. You can see the number right next to the city. Also, if you just would like to see at the state level what every state got, that's listed over here further on the right. So on this combination of pages from ICC and from the National League of Cities, and there's many resources, it can tell you how to apply and what types of activities are funded. Building codes definitely are. They were deemed early on, and I'm certain many of you know this, essential information. So digital codes absolutely applies as being qualified. Tina, I see you coming in.
Thanks, Jean. In reference to learning more about the American Rescue Plan, these links are really a wonderful place to start to get an understanding of not only the funding allocation, the process to start application, in reference to where to get that information, all great sites. But I also wanted to let everyone know, starting in the month of June through the month of September, ICC will be providing a webinar each month about the American Rescue Plan and how that particular plan can help support many different ICC solutions, not only digital codes premium, custom local building codes, permitting services, plan review. There's a lot of information that ICC will be providing, so please check with the ICC site on upcoming webinars on the American Rescue Plan.
Boy, that's a great piece of information, Tina. I wasn't aware of that. Did you say starting in June?
Starting in June will be the first session, and that will be focused on specifically on permitting software.
Wonderful. So maybe one of the things we can do when we follow up with folks is share the link to where people could sign up or to attend those webinars. That's a great idea. All right. So at this point, we wanted to make sure that we gave you a happy building month. I'm trying to get that slide. Happy building month, building safety month. And we're pretty much through the month of May, but we would be remiss without saying that it is now, and we are in week 3, so we're in water safety, and week 4 is disaster preparedness. Hello, access to virtual resources. As promised earlier in the webinar, we would give you links to some various local building codes so that you could test it out for yourself. Again, even if you don't have a premium access license, you would be able to click these links and have a look at what some of these communities have done. Tina, you want to catch something before I leave there?
Yep, just really quickly, I know we're running a lot of time, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about these particular projects. They're completely different in scope and size, right? So when you go and actually look at these links and you look at the hosted sites, you're going to see one of them that's an example of one custom title and they were happy and excited to have it, and that was Guadalupe, Texas, to Bellevue, Washington, who had 8 custom titles and over 15 different general hosted sites. So the mix is wide and deep. So you might think it's not worth engaging in a conversation for one title, but I'm telling you it is. So please know that we can help you with whatever situation you're in.
You know, Tina, that's a great point, because aren't we also going to be sharing links to a case study with Guadalupe, where they did do one title and couldn't be happier? So we have and the 2 case studies that we have are the one title and then Bellevue, who was big.
Multiple. Yeah, absolutely.
We have a couple of other questions here about kind of specifics. One of which is, excuse me, can we customize past editions? For example, we're still using the 2019 or the 2009 IECC. IEEC. I can't talk today. 2009, unfortunately, no. Right now, we can go back to the 2018s. We can do anything going forward, but right now we're not able to do them going back before 2018. But if you have some municipalities have certain codes that they adopted more current and certain that they've kept the old one. We can certainly do the more current ones. And then when the time comes that you do upgrade to a newer version, we can add that. We have another question about a locally written plumbing code. So they have a plumbing code that's written locally, and it's, I'm assuming, not directly affecting the ICode per se. And she asks, do we compare them and create a new code? Do we transfer the local code into the ICode? We haven't really run into that situation yet. So we'd have to talk about the specifics of that and how we would do it. Right now, all we've really worked through so far is amendments that specifically amend the ICodes. But I'm sure there's a solution that we can work out for you. We just have to look at the specifics and see what makes the most sense there.
Wonderful. All right, while you look at what other questions might be coming in, I'm just going to change the screen quickly to let everyone on the call know if you would like someone to talk further about this, to get a demonstration where you can ask live questions. You can reach out to the people that these are the faces of the wonderful people behind the scenes that can help you out. We've given you not only a face to look at, but then a table of, depending on the state you're in, who is going to be the person that you would reach. And down here, there's a link that would get you their email address. So if you click the contact information, it's going to take you to General Code's homepage, where we have our team highlighted in all of their email addresses. And I would be remiss without saying thank you for joining us. I hope it was helpful for you, informational, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. I did take a little note about what Christina said about upcoming webinars, and I am going to get that link and make sure that anyone who wants to sign up, I know I'll be there, you can attend those month to month.
So we have a couple more questions here, and we'll open it up now to any questions that people have. Just put them in the questions panel. So the first question is, would this work for the zoning code too? So yes, if you have adopted the zoning based on the ICC model zoning code, it would work for that as well. If not, and you have a zoning that you need available electronically, let us know. We have different solutions for that. And then we have a question that says, what if your state is not listed? If your state is not listed, We have Scott Murphy, who is the last person in that picture, and he covers all the states that aren't listed.
I'll
So
add to that,
your
Mary
go-to
Ellen.
guy. Pardon?
I'll add to that, Mary Ellen. Just so you know, when you go ahead and hit the contact information there, each one of those reps currently covers many states throughout the US. And so the site itself will tell you what states they cover, and we've added actual states for our reps to cover that they originally didn't have, and that's why the table's there. So if you were part of Maryland or Virginia or New York or New Jersey or any other state, those reps are represented. So feel free to go ahead and hit the link and find out who you can reach out to.
Mary Ellen, I'm working to get the link to show for Hartford. Am I in Chapter 82 building construction or Chapter 83?
So, no, where you are is good. So go to, say, for example, Section 82.2 modifications. And then if you see on the bottom there, it says the following sections are changes or additions to certain sections of the ICode. And then there's a note that says to see that, here's the link, and you can click right on that, and it will take you right over to the Hartford County landing page on the ICC codes.
So for all 5 books, those links exist, so you can get to the mechanical code. Perfect.
Right, right. And what I did is I put the links to go to the landing page so that it makes it easier for people to get to an individual code, whatever ones they need.
Boy, timing was just great, ladies. We have, I think, though, I wanted to say, if anyone has any other questions and you want to stay around, we are all committed to staying here until people are all done. So if you are all set and your questions are answered, then you can leave, and we thank you again for coming. If you want to stay around and ask a question, you're certainly welcome to do that. So while people are leaving, Mary Ellen, I have a quick question for you. Like I think we all know a lot about municipal codes and the code building project and how the communication is. When you're building a custom ICode, is there a lot of back and forth with your contact person, or once they give you the documents, are you pretty like knowing what you should do?
There's a little bit of back and forth, and it depends on what we find in there. Sometimes there are provisions that it's not really clear how it's supposed to be incorporated. So then we'll have a conversation on that, and that makes it allows us to make it clear to the end user what it should read. And then sometimes we find things like, you know, how throughout the codes there are the United States measurements and then usually the metric measurements in parentheses. A lot of times when people do an update, they'll update one and not the other. So we make sure that that's okay to update. We check things like that.
Awesome.
So a little bit of back and forth.
And it's generally one point person that you have, or oftentimes is it a whole committee?
Usually one person, sometimes
Nice.
2 or 3, but usually one. Bobby asks, can the state do this, or does it have to be individual users? So in some states, there are state codes. The state has gone through and made amendments, and those codes are already available on the ICode website. Other states, the state does not do it, and it is left to the municipalities to adopt and make any changes that they want. So it really does vary state by state. You're very welcome. Any other questions? It's the last people waiting to see if anybody else has a question that they want to know the answer to.
That's the
That would be me.
About a group, though, because the questions that you don't think to ask, somebody else does, and you know, it's valuable to you. So
Right.
you're muted, my friend.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, I have a question for you.
Sure.
It's really about timing, because I recognize we've learned through the 4 specific custom projects that we've built so far that timing on the deliverables has a lot to do with the number of titles. We understand that, and the number of amendments. But in general, could you give us some insight into from the time we actually get the contract to delivering, let's just say, one custom ICode with a fair amount of amendments?
Let me take it kind of to a more standard, because I think there's not that many that have one. But say we have 4 or 5, that's probably most typical. We could be looking at somewhere in the realm of probably 2 to 3 months to turn that from start to finish. Some will go a little quicker, some will take a little longer depending on the scope of amendments, but that's a standard. We can do them pretty quickly.
And then once you're done with your work, Mary Ellen, in incorporating the thing, right? The magic, the ability for us to deliver the PDFs and the printed books, that's just ready to happen because of the way that you're creating them, right? That's auto-generated for them once your work is complete.
I wouldn't say auto-generated, but yes, it's pretty quick after. We usually deliver them in 3 steps. First step would be the PDF. Second step would be the Digital Codes Premium, because we like to give people a chance to take a look at the PDF and make sure everything works for them.
That's
and
nice.
Then the third would be paper codes to follow, depending on what people get. Some people don't get paper codes, but that's usually the progression we would do. And that all happens within a matter of a week or 2.
And that makes really good sense, because when you deliver that PDF first, it's almost like your beta. Look at it, make sure you love it. And before we go invest all the other time and money, let's do this one right, and then everything else can just flow along.
Right, and that also allows people to share it and get used to, looking at it digitally and see how they like that before they have to deal with, what is our connectivity and how do we handle the digital from the field if we need to, and that sort of thing.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, Jeannie, that the assessment process that we go through with a customer prior to signing a contract is pretty easy as well. We're fortunate to, even within General Code, to have subject matter expertise in the building space, in the sales department, who can look at your current code, evaluate the number of amendments you've actually made to your municipal code, and come up with an assessment of what it would cost to actually create your custom code license and or series of books that we're doing. So if you're ever curious about pricing the work effort to create a custom local building code compared to the budget you have in place today for buying your content off the ICC store, go through that process. It does not take long at all, and you can actually do a comparison.
Yep, that's a great point. I'm glad that you added that we have the expertise in-house. I was part of a demonstration just last week or the week before and got to see it firsthand with a representative and talking to someone who had a lot of questions and was tired of carrying around 2 resources and really looking forward to it. But you're right, it was painless. There was a few questions that needed to be asked, and everything can flow from there.
Yep.
Well, ladies, I think if we don't have any other questions coming in, people are slowly leaving, I think we can end the webinar.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Mary Ellen.